I'm going to let William start with this one, because this is one that is the age-old question of how do you judge art? You know, creativity is a personal choice. How do we measure somebody else's creativity? What classifies something as art or not art? And why does it affect us as the people who put it together, but not them, without having to go to critique and explain our every little inspiration? So, William, why don't you take this one? And I found this artwork, which I absolutely loved, and I don't know if it's troubling, or if it's intriguing, or if it's I don't know. It says a lot of things to me when I look at, you know, the clock, when I look at the different drawers, when I look at the notes in the drawer, the fact that the subject is looking away, and that shadow in the back says everything to me. So I want William to run with this, because I think he's one of the best visual judges on the planet, and he's very insightful when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna let you take this one.
Are you wanting me to talk about the picture, or talk about the process of how do we judge it?
I think all of the above, because I'd love to know your insight on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What's interesting is I think that, like, if I look at this, I'm intrigued by, you know, is this kind of her look at her life and things that have happened and various components, but also time's running out and what's left and what does she have coming, you know, the shadow death or things like that. So I think it gives us a lot of aspects of, it ticks all those boxes. Like, you're going to look at it and be really intrigued. It has an emotional impact. You can get goosebumps when you think about how you interpret it. And then you can get that aha or intellectual side as you work through it. I think what would be interesting is to look at this then from what we just talked about in general effect of what are the layers that you can dig into, what do you get as an immediate impact from the look, why is her hair red, and how does that make you look at this, who's the guy, you know, what's his role. So I think that when we're judging art, which is always a challenge, we're going to be different. And what I usually say is we will value the uniqueness of each judge, and we want you to bring your life experiences to the table, and then we want you to filter it through the system. And so we ask you to step back and look at every one of those boxes. They may have the most artistic approach and it moved you the most. You might still pick them first, but how far would you put them away from other groups? I think we want each judge to be very aware of what they respond to more. You know, if Dave is really into this picture and someone did it as a show, it would make it an interesting show for him to judge. So it's a way for us to balance as we look at it. I do think it's an odd, you know, the North Carolina thing was very odd to me because they're not seeing what they do as art, and they're seeing what they do as mechanical and performance. So we're always going to be different. And I think we've seen in the indoor world more, percussion world more. I think BOA has this really successfully in place, is they're less concerned about picking who wins than they are about having unique artistic experiences. And I'd like to see that in every neighborhood of every band group, that we could say within your grouping, are you in the right grouping? And then we don't really care who wins, even though we know we do. But I think we let it play itself out, if that makes sense. But I think this goes to, if you're about art and you want to be artistic, then be that, and then be the best at that you can be. If you're not comfortable with that, then we're asking you to pick everything else in the system and layer a little bit of artistic aspect on top of it.
So I would say, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because he just hit all the points for me. I mean, when I found this painting, my wife's an architect, and she was in the room next door doing a sketch, and I said, who's the most controversial artist that you could imagine? And I just started going through some of those things, and this one actually popped up, and I'll have to be honest with you, I did not look at who the artist was, but once I got to this one, I just thought that, for me, answers a lot of things about why we misinterpret design. Like, there's a band director sitting at home designing a show and using this as a motivation. And when the show comes out, it doesn't come out with this image, you don't use this image. You just use
That's
this
right.
as an inspiration. And then you get to the point at home where this is how you're designing your show. Well, the judge never sees this image, and you're trying to interpret what this lifespan is about. There's so many drawers that we have in our life, and we're looking over our shoulder at how many minutes we have until death, and will we check all the boxes in life that we want to. And and we haven't said anything about the male figure at the bottom, but the male figure at the bottom, what does that represent? So I'm just saying this, the last bullet point on here, the why, again, why does it affect us, but not them? I think you have to be, and pardon this, because I know so many people don't like this word, but sometimes you have to be literal, and literal sometimes answers the questions. If you become so vague so much of the time, and you don't ever give us those mile markers throughout the performance to say, you are now here, we want you to be here, here's your exit. I think that you get to the end of performance, and I know I've done it a million times, and the end of the show happens and the audience doesn't respond, you don't respond, and then you hear the so-and-so high school marching band, you're going, what? And you just kind of, what just happened? And you want to start the wrap up by, okay, but you can't, and so there's those moments of uncertainty, and those moments of questions that I always tell this when I train judges, if you leave a performance with more questions than you had before they played the first notes, we got a problem. And so I think that's one of those things that as a judge, you think about. Now, the questions could be a lot of whys of insight. Those are fine questions, but it's like, what the heck did I just see? Like, I'm not sure what that was. It was all the emotions. It was all the intellectual devices. It was all the aesthetic. They had all that, and I have no idea what they wanted me to get out of that. And Juno can tell you too. Juno and I spent some time together this summer judging the open class for DCI. And there's some performers in those groups that are so clear, and then others that you go like, well, somebody had to have the 9 from me tonight, because you just get to that point of going, I have no idea what they're doing. So I think we have to be careful about where the inspiration of art comes from, but I also think we have to be careful about not crediting when not just you, but even the audience didn't get it. And that's usually a marker for me. I remember when Michael Cesario put on the sheet, engagement of the audience became a part of the evaluation sheet. And Nola Jones, who I know many of you know, was judging general effect one night, and she got so choked up in the middle of one of our performances. And I remember her saying, I'm leaning out of the press box and looking at the audience, and my God, everybody got it tonight. And I thought, that's a good check. The audience they don't have the GE sheet in front of them, but what they do have is an innate ability to respond. And in a GE caption, a lot of our feedback is response to the what and the how and the why. It's the human aspect of the evaluation. It's not analytical. It cannot be analytical. Don't turn a GE sheet into an ensemble sheet. It's got to be completely reactive. And so many ensemble judges jump to the GE sheet many times when they're first learning to judge GE, and it becomes an analytical read. It's not a response. Put your finger on a hot iron and ouch. You don't put your finger on the iron and go, let's evaluate the number of bubbles on the edge of my fingertip now. It can't be that. It's got to be reactive, and I think that's where sometimes we miss out on that.
Do you have, Dave, what would the grandmother say in one of these slides? I forget.
Yes. In fact, that's coming up. In fact, I'm going to I'm going to skip to that one real quick, and we'll come back if I can make that happen.
No, I just think that's really important that we often say in GE that the show should come to you and you need to give credit to the best performance and just really GE is the overall effect. Who would you want to see again? I think then this aspect of recognizing the audience, the judge is an informed audience member. And so you have to be channeling that and not get too caught in your head, for sure.
So if you know who Michael Gray is, I heard Michael say this the very first time years ago. And Michael is very animated and there's no lack of words coming out of that man. But he said something about the grandmother concept, and it was basically, if my grandmother's sitting in the audience after the show, did she understand it? And it doesn't have to be complex. I think that's one of the things we think we design to the complexity side of things, and that's going to be more impressive. Sometimes people just want it. They want to understand what it is. And so from the judge perspective, did I get it on the first read, or would it take multiple viewings to fully understand the intent of the product? We don't have that. And you know what? This fall, we could have it less than ever. Like it might be 3 or 4 performances at best, and people are going to have to get it on the first one. From a judge perspective, 1 viewing, 1 initial response. Are you throwing babies out of the press box at the end of it? Or is that silence that's deafening and you say, I don't know what I just saw? And it's really about the complexity. It doesn't have to create inaccessibility. And I think sometimes that happens, that we take a topic or content that is so really nondescript and so hard tangibly to bring to a football field, and I tell people this all the time, don't forget, guys, it's just marching band. We're not creating opera here. We're not creating Broadway here. Yes, it needs to be engaging. Yes, it needs to be entertaining, all the things, but it can't be inaccessible. And sometimes we get to the point of, we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this. And then you get to this point and you go like, there's no way that's going to work, and it becomes almost the inaccessibility of it for the performers is a big problem as well. So I'm going to skip back so we get to this one. And this is kind of what we've been talking about as far as recognizing the components of design. And this, again, is from the band director side. I skipped forward to the judge side of things, but this is from the band director side of things. Achievability. Will my students grow beyond the technical? Okay. Richard Salcedo wrote my music at Kennesaw for years, and I had a grade 6 wind ensemble, a second band that was a 5, a third band was a 4, and a fourth band that was a 3-2 freshman band. And I would always tell him, write the music at a grade 3+ level, because I wanted everybody to be able to achieve it, whether it was the grade 2, 3 kids having to work to achieve it, or the grade 4, 5, 6 kids playing with the best quality of sound, the best tone, the best articulation, all the things they could do from a musical standpoint, because we forget sometimes on the music side of things, they still have to move, right? So a grade 6 wind book or a grade 5 wind book compounded by, 9 minutes of drill puts that at a level that's almost impossible to achieve. And the mark of that is, what if they stood still and played it? Could they do it? Probably so. Now move them backward at a 6 to 5 doing that. Can they do that? No, they can't. So I tell my university kids this, and I believe this, and I have to remind myself this, is teach to the middle, design to the middle. That way everybody can play. And when I mean play, I don't mean play their instruments. They can participate, at a higher level than if you exclude kids. It's like throwing a freshman into like a trigonometry class. They're not going to get that because they haven't had math 1, 2, and 3 to get to trig or algebra or whatever that might be. But you got to put them in the center of the ability group for everybody to contribute. Accessibility, the performer's accessibility to perform, the audience's accessibility to the performance, and the adjudicator's accessibility to not only the performer's demands, that's back down to the field stuff, the audience's response, the adjudicator's understanding of the sheet, now I have access to or not access to your program. So it's all those layers that you really have to consider. And again, this is from a band director standpoint. I'm not talking through judges' eyes right now. From a band director standpoint, when you're putting your program together, are you allowing the performer to understand what they're doing, especially if you have young kids, the audience's understanding of what you're asking them to understand, and then giving the adjudicator all the things that he or she may be evaluating from in terms of criteria. The educational journey, the time you have, and boy, is this pertinent right now, the time you have, the educational process. Are you teaching to the test and teaching kids that a rhythm is not about counting? The rhythm goes like this, or I want you to play loud and play so loud that the stadium cracks. Where do we teach tone? Where do we teach accessible performance? Are we teaching to the test? Is the result more important, or is it the time spent on teaching it the right way to achieve the result that you have in your mind? And I say this teaching to the test thing because I see so many bands in the springtime where they're sitting on a stage playing their concert evaluation, and then you'll see them in the fall and they can't play. And the biggest problem is, what goes back to the question that came up earlier, how much does the how affect the general effect? Ladies and gentlemen, I would say if you can't play, then it's going to, for me as a musician, almost be offensive. You know, you've done something wrong as a director, that if you did not prepare your students for the marathon, somebody told them it was a 5K and it was a marathon, you know, and I think that happens in year-round education, year-round pedagogy, year-round training. The time that you have, whatever that might be, during the day, after school, whatever that be, create a process that's going to create a positive result and create an educational journey, and not a going from A to Z to be able to get there without having put all the other filler in the process. We've already talked about the entertainment thing, but I always say this: allow the audience beyond the front sideline. They're not out there in the stands to sit there and eat hot dogs. They're there to react, to become an involved process, or involved to the process of the kids' performance. So they've got to get across that front sideline. The kids want to feel the audience, and the audience wants to feel the performers. How many times have our kids come off the front sideline and said, do you think we did well? And I was like, well, what do you mean? What? I don't know. They didn't react. You know, did they like us? Do you think the judges are thinking the same thing that we did on the field? It felt weird, you know, and I've had multiple performances of kids coming off the field at a regional or grand nationals or whatever that was. They were like, that felt weird. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, what felt weird about it? And they were like, well, it felt like we were out there by ourselves. We could only hear ourselves. We didn't hear the audience respond. Did we do well? And I'm like, you didn't do any different than you've ever done. And yes, the audience responded, but we couldn't hear them. And environment has a lot to do with that. So you almost have to over communicate so the kids can really feel that audience response and know, because it's engaging to both sides. It's fuel for the students. It's fuel for the audience. It's fuel for the students. It's fuel for the audience. That's an ongoing thing, but knock down the wall on the front sideline. And then there's the intellectual fun stuff, the aha factor. Like, they got it. You know, that's the part of you may mix the aesthetic, you may mix the emotional to create the intellectual, but at the end of the day, the design came full circle. And that's when they're like, brilliant, whether that's the audience's response or whether that's the adjudicator's response. William?
Well, I was intrigued, Dave, and I've got the way I always think about it is, we've been talking a lot of, there is a formula for success, and I think these capture that. I usually say that you want to make sure it's musical, and then you're making your kids look as good as they can look, and then you make it memorable. And what's intriguing to me is the last part we were just talking about is how do we handle a season when it might only be the band parents and it might be something really radically different. And so I think having prepared the performers for what that environment might look like. And I know a lot of Colorado's talking about that, of where, the bands can come, you change the rotating schedule, shorten the show, leave it at 15 minutes. The band parents can come in, everybody spread out, watch and leave, so it's a whole different world we might have to be ready for, that what the performers might have been used to feeding off of, what's that going to be like, and how can you make them understand a different world?
Yeah. I'm gonna skip through these next two slides. I'm just gonna hit them and talk a little bit about them. And William, feel free to chime in. I know we're getting to the end of this, and I want to get into the judge side of this because there's another aspect to this I want to chat about. So, and I'll provide these slides actually to the association. You're welcome to keep these and have them. But the power of the performers, we talked about this, the consideration of achievement, considering the what and the how, and really kind of considering the performance quality of what they're being asked to do. And that's going to be something I'm sure Gino's talked to you guys about, especially if you get a shortened season, or as far as what the performers are doing, how well they're doing it, what that tolerance level is in terms of where we are in the season, having not had 3 or 4 weeks of shows, that kind of thing. Considering the range of communication, the style of the communication, and the variety of the vocabulary that's presented. That's all in that how. Every bit of that is about the power of the performers. They can control that. Not so much the what, but for sure the how, and how they communicate and really define that variety of vocabulary. And I love this one, and not to get off on a religious tangent, but I couldn't figure out a better way of saying it. But do you hear and see what I hear and see? As a band director, share your movie with the students and your audience. They have to see, they have to be inside your mind, your heart, your intellect, all the things that make you really understand why you started the show in the first place, why you chose this show. And we're back to that why word, but I really believe that's important. Create a logical and clear and engaging design curve. I have a friend, well, I'll tell you who it is. It's Kevin Ford. He said when he reads a book, he reads the last chapter first, and then he reads the first chapter second. And then when he reads the whole book, he watches the whole story unfold, because he knows where it's supposed to end and where it initiated. And that gives him a better understanding about how the writer created this. And I think we have to design shows in that way. It's like, ultimately, what is the penultimate moment that we say, yes, gotcha, that's the one. That's what everything is going to lead to. And the beginning of it's easy to figure out where you're going to start. It's that midpoint that creates pacing problems. And many shows I see do really well starting at the beginning and get to the middle, and they don't know how to end it. So maybe that's about starting with the end in mind. We talk about that a lot. The KISS concept, just keep it simple, stupid. I really believe that's important, and that's about being literal. And I know we don't like that word, because that doesn't sometimes reflect that we might be not creative. Adam Sage, that did my color guard forever at Kennesaw Mountain, used to just go nuts on me, because he was like, "Why don't you just hand the audience a book and tell them everything that you want to do?" And he and I went back and forth about this kind of stuff. But for me, it's like, if I can't be engaged, if you won't let me be engaged, or it's so highbrow that we can't understand what I'm asking you to get, and you responding to what the students are performing, I don't really understand the motive behind that. I think that's one reason I really like Broadway so much. Is because I can go in and I don't have a preconceived notion about what it is, and I come out changed in 2 hours. And I think that for me, from a design standpoint, that's important. Or go to something that is non-marching band and see if you can come up with the components of design about hearing and seeing maybe what the creator intended, whatever that is, whether it's, Project Runway. I love Frasier. I think that Frasier episodes are a clinic in GE because there's always something that goes, here's the A, here's the B, here's the C, and now we're going to come back to the A at the very beginning and make the rest of it make sense. We do an exercise with my marching band techniques class using a Frasier sitcom about recognizing the emotional, intellectual, and intellectual effect and how the whole thing comes full circle. And then the last thing is just don't overthink it. It's marching band, and I know that's easy for me to say, but we're going to be judged. It doesn't matter. My staff at Kennesaw went crazy on me in 2006 because the whole show was about a life cycle of a child, and the whole show was built around nursery rhymes. The whole show was theme and variations on nursery rhymes. And it won GE, and it won music effect that night in finals, playing nursery rhymes. I'll look at what Ronald Reagan, Texas did this year. Won the San Antonio VOA regional, not one prop on the field. And it was all about great performance, great engagement, great communication, and took all the aspects of props out. And I asked Dan Morrison, the director, I said, why did you make that choice? He said, because we were going to Macy's and we didn't have enough money to build props. So you go back and you look at the why in that. That was a logical design choice, and he didn't need it because everything else communicated so well. William?
Yeah, I think just it's important for judges to see and comment on these kinds of things too. It all speaks to having a total view. And I think what was interesting to me is when we finish and we look and go, do you want to see that group again? That's a key factor rather than, there was something more special there. And I think starting with the end in mind is really important. And that may be something for this challenging year, and I often do it in the winter. I always figure out my ending and I teach it first. And then by the time the group gets there, it's the strongest part of the show, because usually it's the opposite. And so it may be something for the band directors to really be considering is don't work your opener first, work your ending first. And then you have to grow into it. And then you can always have that strength as you come across in the season.
That's a great point. And I didn't know you did that, but I think that's really a great thing as far as starting with the end in mind. I wish we could do that with marching band. That would be kind of difficult to do, to back up that many sets, but that certainly makes sense as far as the winter guard activity. So there's Judy. So from the judge perspective, and we're going to go through this quickly because I know there's going to be some Q&A at the end. We want to do this, but just read over this, evaluating the product, the engagement of the product from the judge's standpoint. Now you're on the judge side of things for those that are in the room. Does the show demonstrate a clear sense of purpose? Early season this year, it probably won't. It probably is going to be, I can't tell what you're doing until I see the full product. And you can also comment on the what and the how they're doing, but there is purpose to what you're going to do. I just don't see the full intent of it yet. Does it offer clear and effective communication? How's the pacing? Over 8 to 10 minutes. Does it feel like it's 8 to 10 minutes or 3 hours? And we've all been in those situations where it feels like that show is never going to end. And we've all started our wrap up in the middle of what is not even the closer. So I think that's a big part. The variety, where you consistently engaged and constantly looking forward to the next moment, or did the show linger? I love the shows where it starts and ends and you're like, no, come back, do some more, because it was so good. And I think that we don't get enough of those sometimes as far as the show design goes. And then does the musical and visual orchestration explore layers, sonorities, textures while creating rhythmic and harmonic structure? Is it just one facet? Is it a lot of 2D? Is it a lot of solos? Is it a lot of electronics? Can you tell they're leaning on the electronics and the pre-sampled sounds over the student's performance, or the visual orchestration of the drill designer, or the color guard placement, or the things that they explore as far as trading off musical and visual layers? That is the intrigue part of it, because every second of the show not every second, but every 10 to 15 seconds should feel like something new is happening, that you're engaged for a different reason. I call it the lazy Susan effect, that effect spin in and out of your focus. You don't have to look for it. Here it comes, and wow, wasn't that great? And now you're doing this, and now you're doing that. It's a constant evolution of effect and design. Will, you want to comment there?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, David, like, these are elements we'd love to see in a kind of the normal year, and I think people could try to do it as much as they can.
Right.
I think it's interesting to consider purpose and what you're about as fast as possible. Like Mike Anderson always says, you say hello at the beginning of your show and you have 30 seconds. You need to make me care in that amount of time. So, that would be important regardless. I think what's interesting is, like we've been talking, is try to get a whole show, but then layer on later and add aspects as you can go, depending on your rehearsal time. I was intrigued by your thought earlier of I'm in the mode too of thinking, how can you get small groups together and then go brainstorm show ideas? What parts of the field would you use? How are you going to do that drill? How are you going to teach it? How does the music go together? So I think that's creative ways to meet this variety. And the performers can really get into it and be excited because they know they're doing something unique and it's just them. Yeah.
Well, and the other part of it is, those of us with large bands, that's going to be a challenge. How can you create those environments, especially with some of the challenges we may be looking at this fall, because we're going to be looking at big picture stuff. So, I'm even thinking of stuff. I would not be offended this year as a judge if I saw, side 2 of the field, the performers facing away from the center of the field on one knee on the 0-yard line. And there's a group of performers happening there. And then you see this sequential coming off the side 2 of those people coming up out of the ground. And then they become engaged. And those people become center of focus. And the other people almost become an audience on the field, that they turn toward the center of the field and kneel and face inside while there's another group performing. We see this exchange of role, and we see this exchange of environment. Those are the kinds of things that I think we're going to have to really look at in terms of the purpose. I could see easily doing a reflection show this year and using a side 1, side 2, but everything be about mirror image, or things being about 2 perspectives of one idea, but using 2 larger groups to satisfy the opportunity for there to be less people on the field at one given time. And maybe even having people play back field to a group that's playing front field from a fixed standpoint in the front area. So it's so, I think where we feel like, oh, this is going to be a bummer, I think we can, make lemonade out of lemons right now, because it could, as we say, the earth hit reset, it could reset us, as far as what we are used to from a traditional show design, and engage more performers. And maybe, God forbid, the educational journey will be stronger because we'll be teaching to the micro, not the macro.
That's right.
That opportunity is tremendous.
Each group, to me, each group has its own unique strengths. And so what strikes me is each of you needs to go back and look at what's the best way to show off your talent personally and in your performers, and that will guide you through these constraints. And you can say, everyone will be, we may face the opposite of what Juno was saying earlier. Maybe everyone will be great because they picked their best thing to do rather than they tried to do the formula that we've had over the last few years.
Like that. So from a judge standpoint, considerations for educational commentary, and this is going to get into the pedagogy of why we judge. Do the effects generate, satisfy the triad of effect? You need to educate yourself in that triad to make sure you understand. And here's, I didn't put this on any slide, but this is what I do. Think it, intellectual. Feel it, emotional. See it, the aesthetic. So if you get rid of the buzzwords of emotional, intellectual, and aesthetic and put it in humanistic terms of Does it make me feel a certain way? Did it make me think about something? Did it make me see something, in terms of think it, feel it, see it? Now we're talking about senses. We're talking about it being more tangible, more, I've got emotional all over me, get out the hand sanitizer. You got some intellectual on me just now because you made me think about that, and as far as the seeing it, you made me see the audio visual coordination come together and create a work of art. And that was the aesthetic piece of it. The design part of it, did the design produce a coordinated effort between the music and visual components? Was it all music and you could tell the band director really didn't care about the color guard? Or was it really heavy weighted on the visual and the color guard seemed to make more music than the winds and the percussion did? Are the performers able to effectively communicate as a result of their music and visual mastery? That goes back to, was the show written in the middle? Did we cater to the middle? Did we teach to the middle to allow 9 through 12 or 6 through 12 or 7 through 12 or 8 through 12 to become involved in the production? And then finally, does the audience and you respond appropriately when a desired effect or moment is successfully created? That's the big one for me as an educator. I use the audience. And not the moms and dads from the school waving the flags and, go Big Blue. It's not that. It's, did the audience elicit a response at a very tender moment? And you can even hear people go, oh, or a moment that is really angry. People stand up in the middle of a performance. The angularity is certainly in effect. So is the soft moments. And by the way, so is the silence. Those moments can be so effective from a standpoint of performer that you just suck the air out of the audience. Okay, so that's something from an educational opportunity, from a judge aspect of things that I would consider.
And I think, David, and for the judges, is the comment there is, even though the sheet might say emotional, intellectual, and aesthetic, I think we just want plain speak and for judges to say what they're seeing and feeling and make it easier for the directors to understand. Like often I'll just say the color guard is really loud here and I don't hear that and don't see it. It's like, it's not about coordination, even though it is, but just be really plain and help everybody understand what's going on, or too many people are spinning, or, why did the trumpets come in here and I was looking over there? Just be really straightforward in what's going on in your commentary.
I just got to say, those 3 words you guys just used, that's fantastic. I've been doing this a long time, and I never really looked at it like that. Just those simple 3 words.
Actually, Gino, that came from when I was teaching a marching band tech class about 9-10 years ago. I was like, why am I walking in here and talking a foreign language? I mean, you don't hear the word aesthetic very much in our language. Mm-hmm. You hear emotional, obviously, and you hear intellectual, obviously. But we got to aesthetic, and this student asked me, like, what in the world does that mean? And so we just started talking about words that we can communicate, that we don't need buzzwords. Some of us remember a judge, Junior, I know you probably do, and Clark as well, Clark Williams, who was, he's a brilliant judge. And I was thinking about Clark this week, and just he used a lot of emotion in his critique, and he was a fantastic field visual judge, but you just felt that he was judging you even in a performance caption with those 3 words in mind. The emotional, the intellectual, and the aesthetic. Think it, feel it, see it. He was a part of the program. And I don't care if it's GE, I don't care if it's ensemble, I don't care if it's field. If you think about how the performance is touching those 3 words, and maybe that answers some questions for you as a judge, as well as the appreciation of what the performers are doing. And the performers know if they're eliciting those things. Talk to your kids about it, band directors. Sit down and say, what does the show mean to you? Tell me your story of the show. And I used to do that with the kids. Like, we'd be doing a program, and we did a show one time, and it was all about causes, and we used ribbons as the cause, and we called the show The Gift. And we sat down and we talked about all these different causes that we were connecting those ribbons to, and kids would say, my grandmother died of breast cancer, or my brother has autism, and you start really feeling that. And the kids are like would go out on the field, and I was like, for Cindy, whose brother is going to be in the audience tonight, who's autistic, when we get to that third movement, he's got to feel you talking to him, and putting in real terms like that to students. And that can take it over the top in terms of what the students, because you're taking it off of the subjective and the analytical and making it real. And that's when effect can really happen, in my opinion.
Fabulous.
I think, David, there was one question here about how we can emphasize in judges to, we often get stuck talking about the what and we don't talk about the how. And what I would encourage judges to do is, when I was first starting, is you have to flip those things around in your mind and work hard at the beginning. And like your first comment should be a how comment. And how did they do the what that you see? And if you can get yourself more in that pattern of what Dave was just talking about, is it's so emotional. Well, why is it emotional? Because they understand it and they reached you and they had spent time considering their concept. But I think for judges, it takes effort. It's easy for us to see what they're trying to do. It's hard to, I think of it, kind of get into what the performers are being asked to do. And when Dave talked way back an hour and a half ago about the field perspective, is that's the way I try to zoom in even upstairs and go, what does it take for them to do that? What does it take for them to understand that? How hard is that for them to do? What's their mental challenges and environment? It all factors. Even in effect, it should be coming through going, I can feel them and I know how challenging it is because they just ran across the field and now they're doing this. So being able to take context and talk about how more.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Considerations for your professional growth as a judge. And I learned this from Gary Markham, who has been my mentor through all this as a judge. But he trained judges at one time for DCI and then obviously for Bands of America shows. But these are the things that I always remember why I'm judging and when I wrap up. Did I provide an educational critique to the directors, staff, design team, and performers? Those are the constituents of design. We talk to directors and staff and design team in critique or whatever, but what are those performers, the people that actually brought that performance to life or that design to life? What are they getting out of your critique? After pointing out issues within the performance, did I offer potential solutions to the performance and or design? Gary used to say, fine to bring out any error or any issue that you see, but don't you dare do it unless you have a solution. This is not working here because it's not, your ensemble is not playing together. And here's the deal. The tubas are back there in the very back. What if you brought that to the keyboard in the front ensemble for those 16 counts and drop the tubas out of that? And as the tubas become center stage, the next 16 counts, bring the tubas back in and you can get that tear out of your ensemble really easily. Those are the kinds of things when judges go, or where band directors go, I will listen to that person because he just made my show better and I can go back next week and fix that easily. I missed that one. Did I establish a trustworthy educational environment through my commentary? Lee Carlson taught the judges last year to say, for the amount of time, the first note to the end of the show, you become a member of that team. You become a member of that staff. You become a member of that performance organization, whether it be a BOA group or a DCI group or a marching band from who knows where. Become a part of their team during that time. Establish that environment, establish that trustworthiness, and the educational literacy that you want to be a part of that for the amount of time that they have on the performance field. That's really, really important. Otherwise, it feels like I'm up here, you down there. You get eye level with those people and be a part of what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish. The next one, would I play my critique for my classroom? And I used to do that all the time. Like I would sit there and I'd start to get really hard on a group and think this could wind up as a playback on Monday morning in this band room. And these kids are going to hear me leaning on the director of, you're not teaching these things, or the design team of, why in the world would you write this? I think that is so crucial, that if you feel strong enough about it, you email that director after the performance and say, can I talk to you further about these aspects of your program, because I got a little personally involved with the issues that your kids were having, and I didn't want that to come across on my tape. That's professionalism. And then finally, that I could carefully consider the sheet's criteria reference prior to ranking and rating the ensemble. Was it an elicited response of, oh, that's a 70? Or do you look at those boxes and say, that's where I think they are? Now, a little trick that I use when I'm coming up with that number is I evaluate the whole program and say in my mind, if I was grading this as a project, an academic project, right now I'm sitting at a 72 in my number. They are not a D. Right now I'm sitting at an 81. That's too high. They probably are more like a 78, 77. And then go to the sheet and adjust your number and your tolerance based on where you, at the end of the day, because when your score gets announced, if they score a 91 and you're at a 78, you missed it completely because you focused right in. And I'm not saying don't judge the caption. I'm saying look at the totality of the program and make sure that you didn't focus on the negative, still look at the totality of what they presented when ranking and rating a performance. William?
We've talked a lot about kind of get into what the performers and the group is trying to achieve. And I think that'll change your commentary. Try to get at their goal, their perspective, what they're choosing to do. If everything you can frame in their choices, their achievement, their capabilities, then related to the score sheet, but that would totally shift your commentary. And you become a fan then, and you're helping them do better at what they're chose to do. And I think it makes it easier for me at the end to go, you were better at what you chose to do than this other team was. And that starts to give you the rankings and the score criteria as well.
I like that a lot. So we're down to the last slide, and this is one that kind of takes everything we've talked about as far as effect. And when I think about levels of effect from a judge's standpoint, and this is really for the band director as well, I teach my kids through this. And they know, if I draw that triangle on the board and the artistic level is the very top, maybe 10% of that triangle, and the middle part of that triangle is more like 40, 50%, and then there's a bottom layer that's like 30 or 40%, most kids are going to enter their ability to create effect at a very basic level, developing musical and visual techniques, skills, and facility. They're and the key word to that is it's a developing thing, that they're still trying to learn to play and march well, and communication skills and the facility of all the things that they're being asked to do from a choreographic standpoint. That's basic level. And then you move up into the triad a little bit more in terms of ability and maturity, is displays basic level of achievement, which is the bottom level, plus they display the musical and visual fluency. Now that's the interpretation of the basic, but they still lack the artistic qualities of engagement. And I'm telling you, my fear of our system right now in North Carolina is we're going to have a lot of bands sitting at technical level. You're going to march well, you're going to play well, but you're going to dismiss the artistic potential of the students because you're focusing on right notes, right rhythms, left foot, right foot, body, lower body separation, upper body, horn angle, all the things that are the technical aspect. But the ones that I think that 3 to 5% of the bands in the nation, whether it be concert band, whether it be winter guard, whether it be marching band, whatever that is that artistic level, where they display the technical level, which is the level prior to artistic, and they communicate through artistic engagement. They seamlessly utilize multiple musical and visual devices. They're constantly throwing different aspects of design at you. They don't lean on their strength. They don't show weakness. They show different aspects. And back to Jay Kennedy's thing, they choose the highest ingredients possible for the recipe. And it comes out tasting better than they would if they just went in at a technical or basic level. The fast food versus the gourmet cook, if you will. And through that performance, they create art. And it's taking chances. We haven't talked about that, but you have to take chances sometimes. You have to dip your toe in the water. James Earl Jones stepped into the corn at the end of Field of Dreams, laughed a little bit and stepped back out and went back in and decided that the risk was worth it and kept going, and so those are the kinds of things. Now, if you walk in there and there's a tiger, you're going to, you turn around and run out. You got to know that too, as a band director, that if you're headed into an area that your kids just aren't achieving or performing, it's not worth the risk, but it's worth engaging in the risk. And we've all done it where it's like, let's try this here. You give it a couple of days, it doesn't work. You pull out of that, you decide to go a different route. But at least you showed your students another aspect or another challenge, or someday we need to be able to do this. And William, I know you can speak to this because having your background as a WGI judge and a designer, this really probably speaks very well to you.
Yeah, I think the summary that I would say is we've talked a lot to the band directors today and the judges around what is unique to each group and how do you make your group look the best. And I think you each have unique ingredients, if I use that Jay Kennedy thought. And so how you put them together, are they in a consistent manner? Do they go together? Are they unified? I think that's all the elements we're talking about. So to me, that's what we're encouraging you to do, is a bit of self-awareness and self-reflection this next few weeks, and build on the strengths that you have. And then I think you can zip up into that triangle, that top part of the triangle, maybe depending on how you are with the technical proficiencies. But I think everyone has those superstars, and I think there's a way to show that off. And that's what we're asking and encouraging you to do. And hopefully the information today, plus there were 2 other decks that Chuck and Juno have that you can use as a reference that really look at the formula and things for you to consider as you get ready to work on your summer.
And I'll leave you with this, because I think this is right where we are right now. COVID-19 has really thrown us a curveball, but if you inhale the possibilities, you might just exhale creativity. And it may be something that you don't want to let go of, that if this had not happened, there's a real possibility that you would not have arrived in the areas where you are. And I think that's something to really consider. I'm not afraid of this. What I am afraid of are the chances we didn't take when we had the opportunity to take them, to see what might have come out of it.
Great. Let me make a couple of comments here as we're wrapping up. The PowerPoint presentation and a video of this presentation will be made available, probably be on the website, and I'll probably be sending it out to the membership and all the folks that got the invitation. So you can look forward to those. I'm going to take just a second and put a plug out for the next sessions. They're going to be on May 30th. There's a 10 o'clock session and an 11 o'clock, and music at 10 and visual at 11, and that's on the 30th. And you want to give us a little bit of a synopsis of what you're going to give us there, Dave and William?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a lot about maybe from a standpoint of the sheets, how we determine what the most important aspects of the sheet are. We're going to talk a lot about sampling from a percussion standpoint if you're a field guy. We're also going to talk a lot about how you evaluate that ensemble sheet. And really it's about standing on the podium. If you're a band director, it's standing on the podium and listening to everything that's happening in the room, and how would you run that rehearsal, but turn that into an evaluation as well.
Yeah, and my focus, I think it's interesting given today, is how does the visual design and field, they complement and work into creating effect and building the whole package. And so we'll talk about the sheets and sampling, similar things that Dave talked about, but also just how it all relates and goes together. They all fit into one output, which is the engagement and overall success of the group, and how to make sure you don't get caught focused just on winning my one caption when it may not win the show.
Great. That's going to be on May 30th. If there are any questions out there that didn't get answered today, you can send them to myself or Dave Armbruster or Blair Kuhn or excuse me, Juno, whoever would be the appropriate source. If you want to get a question to David or William, you can send them to me and I'll forward them to those guys. Last thing from me is there's discussion with the MCBA Executive Board to changing the minimum show time for shows this fall. Membership of MCBA be looking for an email from me with a Google ballot on that issue. So we'd love to get that addressed in the very near term. So be looking for that. And Juno, Dave, Blair, you have anything else?
Chuck, do you want to mention as well, because I know we have members on here today that aren't part of MCBA, but talk about the pilot project on September 19th?
Sure. Let me just pitch a couple of things. MCBA made a change this year where we are opening up all our shows to any band. You do not have to be a member of MCBA to participate in MCBA competitions. You need to be a member of MCBA if you want to qualify for state championships. So you could sign up for any MCBA show. The pilot project that we're doing in the first weekend this fall is going to be a different set of sheets that's going to include a percussion sheet and a color guard sheet, a music performance, a visual performance, and general effect for both music and visual. So a very similar approach to what the Scholastic Circuit has done. Just know the percussion sheet and the color guard sheet is judged and it's a part of the overall score. So that's the pilot project. We're trying something new, see what that is. We're also just trying to reach out to those bands that do Scholastic to maybe take a look at MCBA and see if it's something you might want to try out for this year.
Yeah, my comments were going to be the same thing that Dave asked or suggested about commenting on the new pilot program and some of the new changes.
Okay. Juno, any last words?
Yeah, David and William, I mean, that was just fantastic. I'm getting a lot of texts, and you can see there's a lot of things being posted in the chat room about how beneficial this was. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys again in a couple of weeks. I mean, I haven't seen you, it seems like forever, but, you know, this is better than, I guess, not. This is better than nothing.
White Lake, Michigan.
You're all looking great.
Thanks, you too.
But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for today. It was very helpful.
Very
All
good.
right.
And
Well,
Chuck, I just emailed you the presentation, Chuck, so you have the
Wonderful.
whole thing now. So
Thanks so much. Yeah.
you bet.
All right. Well, yep. Everyone that attended, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have so many people with us here, and look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. All right.
Happy Memorial Day, everybody.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah.